There you are. There you are. Thank you.
Great. Yeah. And thanks for the puppet show as well.
I did a puppet show. I told everyone that I did a puppet show, and I flunked. So let's just, what can you do? So listen, first of all, thank you so much. Everyone, the mayor, as I mentioned earlier, he was a Learn and Earn meeting. That's a really important program in the city for our kids. So I didn't want to push him any harder than he was. And for you, Mayor, this is good. It's only about 8 minutes off. So this is a good showing. So thank you so much for being with us today. Okay.
Yeah, my pleasure. And let me just talk about that for 1 second before we get into the other discussion. For those companies that aren't a part of Summer of Earn and Learn, I would ask you to look into it, and I'd ask Brian and Audrey to send you the link. We had 1,700 students this year, with COVID, that had the opportunity to work at companies throughout the city and throughout the county. And I just got off a Zoom. Two of the young women both go to Community College of Allegheny County. One who did her internship at West Penn Hospital, the other who did her internship at PJ Dick, working on the terminal building in the Strip District, an engineering student and a nursing student. Brilliant, absolutely brilliant young women who otherwise would never have had a shot at being able to do this. And if you can imagine 1,700 young people.
I didn't even know it was that big. That's great.
And we're looking at ways in order to create social equity and address racial disparity. There is no better way than getting your company involved in helping to employ these kids over the summer. Oh, and guess what? We raise money so that not only do they get paid, but you get paid for hosting them. Right. So it's a win-win. Or if you don't want to do that, make a contribution to the program so that companies can do it. And especially in technology, where there is such a divide, women, minorities, and others, my gosh, help them at the age of 18, 19, 20, and you'll help to change their lives.
So here's someone actually in the audience saying she did it. This is Stephanie Chernay saying she did an Earn and Learn. It's fabulous. She did a similar program in high school with the Steelers when she was 15 and 16. And said it was a formidable experience. Yeah. So yeah, I so love your passion on that. So since I was doing the puppet show, what we did is we actually asked people to put in the chat a whole bunch of questions and sort of lay that up. I had a whole bunch of questions, but I think we might want to set the stage on a couple of things. But before we just jump right into those questions, is that, there's an interview that was just released with Richard Florida. So he's an old friend of yours, and you've known him, 20, 25 years, right? Yep. When you were in city council, I believe. And, he, in the interview that's done by Pittsburgh Quarterly, he talks about, Pittsburgh, obviously, transformation, changes, and his love, etc. But here's a quote that I just want to extract. He said, "I think Pittsburgh should be the model of the best, the most equitable, the most inclusive, the healthiest, the safest, and most resilient small city in the world." Hats off to Bill Peduto. So that's the way I wanted to sort of set the table, but I want you to realize that there are a ton of things. You have initiatives that you've started in terms of equity, inclusion, safety. There are so many things that you're working on, and we're in this whole new world. We're in this new world that we're not going to go back to. And I know that you have a passion about the restaurants, the music scene, the importance of the fabric of this region and the things that matter so deeply to the tech community. So I don't know if you wanted to say a few things, and then Jonathan and I sort of just start to ask you some of the questions that people want to talk to you about, if that's okay.
Absolutely. So that's a great way, and I appreciate that. So we're dealing right now with a pandemic that we haven't dealt with since 1918. We're dealing with the reality of an economic collapse that we haven't dealt with since 1932. And we're dealing with civil rights movement that we haven't dealt with since 1968, all simultaneously, right? We have all of these really, very difficult challenges. And as I said to one of my fellow mayors last week, it's a really, really difficult time to be a mayor because you're wrong no matter what you say. And you're wrong on both sides, and people just don't want to hear, but they want to hear. And there has never been a better time to be a mayor because that type of change doesn't happen without these types of situations. So the culmination of all of this happening together provides us the opportunity to make big changes that we wouldn't have without it. So yeah, you lose sleep, you lose a lot, but at that same time, you also have this opportunity to pull together ideas and be able to do things. Now, there's challenges because, you see the protests happening in the streets, and you hear young people talking about abolishing police, abolishing jails, just taking on radical approaches. But you understand that solutions require more pragmatic approaches, and being able to see systemic change requires partnerships that go well beyond city government. Mm-hmm. And you can't burn the bridges with those that you're going to need to be the partners in order to make that change happen. You have to be able to pull it together while at the same time being cognizant and listening to young voices. And so there are the challenges that are out there, and they're very real. But the opportunity has never been so prime for real change to occur. And I'll leave that out there as sort of a setup to answering the questions of where we are and where every mayor that I talk to is around this country. We realize that change isn't coming from Washington. And we realize that it's going to be slow to happen from our state capitals. That real change is only going to occur locally, and it's going to occur through partnerships with stakeholders that are committed to their cities. So what Richard Florida said is absolutely correct, and it will only happen if people have pride in Pittsburgh.
So before we jump into this, there's a gentleman in here, Larry Goya, who reminds me that this is an important question to always ask. And you are definitely in a role that requires, and I love the way you laid that up. Yeah, there's nothing you can do right. There's nothing you can do wrong. And in the course of a day, how are you holding up? How are you doing? You, Bill Peduto.
I'd be doing a hell of a lot better if the Penguins won last night. I was so disappointed.
Gave it away.
But anyway, to be honest with you, it's rough. And there's a lot of consoling that we've been doing as mayors on a weekly basis, doing these types of things and just going, what the hell is going on in this world? Right. I get and I understand that there are those that are going through a lot of pain right now, and that either emotional hurt or sadness or anger brings about a different way of dealing with issues. And I just try to be above the emotional part and try to focus on the pragmatic part. And the thing that really gets me by is the positive conversations. So less social media, more dealing with people who are looking for positive solutions.
Sounds like a plan.
Yeah, it's really important. I hope you're taking care of yourself, whatever that means, whether that's sleep, rest, eat, who knows, but it's important because we need you at the epicenter of all this local stuff. So let's jump into some questions here. There's a litany of questions, and out of fairness, I flunked on the puppet show, so I'd really like to be able to have some of these questions be asked. So, I mean, can you address housing during the pandemic and moving forward with fair and affordable housing?
Yeah. I think that as you start to look at disparity and you look at it through the lens of data, being able to show where actual disparity exists based upon race, based upon income, based upon gender, the three big issues that create cyclical poverty are housing, transportation, education, and a fourth issue being access to quality health care, both physical and mental. Those are sort of like the foundations of where you need to be able to address. In the city of Pittsburgh, we've failed on housing, and I'll say that. We have a system that's basically dictated through the federal and state government that makes it very difficult. I'm sorry, that's not coronavirus,
It's fine.
allergies still. That makes it very difficult to recycle land. Hopefully that helped.
Yeah.
We have 17,000 vacant lots, abandoned housing, and condemned properties throughout the city of Pittsburgh. Yet we don't have a system that identifies the ability to do partnerships with faith-based institutions, nonprofits, local organizations to turn those blighted properties and put them back on the tax roll through affordable means of home ownership. We don't have a plan to take several of those properties and make it part of our green infrastructure plan for stormwater management. And we don't have a plan to take part of those and combine them together to build parks in neighborhoods that don't have access to any green space whatsoever, so that every member of the city of Pittsburgh, every single person, has a park within 10-minute walk. That is our goal for the 2021 budget, to be able to put into place the resources to be able to do just that. I have a lot of interest from churches, from neighborhood groups and others to be able to take on 3, 4, 5 properties on a street and completely change the character of the street. And instead of having an abandoned property as an anchor that's pulling it down, having it as an anchor that's building the community around it.
Right.
We've focused so wrong in this country on housing. Housing is not a place to sleep. Housing, thank you, James.
Thanks, James.
Housing is a community. It's a place where you have access to food, where you have access to transportation, where you have access to a church, where you have access to a gym, where you have access to a school. That's a community. What we did is we built housing for poor people up on top of a hill with absolutely nothing around it, completely isolated and encapsulated poverty, and expected people to break out of poverty. There's no successful model that has worked that way. And we should be looking more towards like what Vienna did after World War I, when it was no longer the world's capital. It was a small rural country's capital. And they created new housing opportunities for the homeless that were around 20% of the population. And that housing was connected by rail, and it had a school, and it had a doctor's office, and it had a library, and it had all the things that made a community.
Right.
So we have to rethink housing. And one last thing I'll say with that.
Yes.
If we let 2 generations live in public housing, we failed them. That is our job, not just to provide that housing when you're in public housing, but to making sure that your children are doing well in school, to making sure that you have access to the tools to break out of that, and that your next generation of children are not required to live under public housing.
So, Mayor, what's happened with the land bank initiative? Is that still going on? Since we're talking about
it is, but we're looking at tearing it apart. Under Pennsylvania state law, it is very difficult to be able to clear title, even with the benefit of the land bank system. So either we will create, like Dick Caligiuri had, a Department of Housing, or we'll work with the URA to create a housing initiative under that. But we have siloed for about 30 years our real estate holdings in our finance department, our housing development planning under planning, our economic development under housing, and our public subsidized housing under the housing authority. It can't operate that way. It can't operate under 4 separate systems. It has to be one housing initiative. We thought land bank was the answer, and we may have been wrong.
So I'm going to just switch for 1 minute. We're going to go back to the questions, and it's something that in the world that I live in and the tech community lives in, okay, just so for a minute in terms of work. So we're seeing a growing trend of obviously remote, right? Work from home. We've already seen that, and we've had to do that for an array of reasons. But now we're seeing remote first as an opportunity. So if you and I have a company together and we decide that we want to hire Jonathan, who's living in Salt Lake City, we decide we're going to let him live in Salt Lake City. He's going to continue to work for us. He doesn't need to move to Pittsburgh. So people are feeling more comfortable allowing those kinds of things happening. How will this change cities and regions? You have to be hearing this from other mayors as well, because there is a little bit of an assumed exodus from some big cities, but it seems like that people are moving to other sort of smaller cities like in Austin or Chicago, et cetera. We'll see it with the census for sure when the data comes out. Do you have any thoughts on that? Do you have any, I know in Tulsa, Oklahoma, they're paying people $10,000 if they can work remote and move to Tulsa.
Yeah, and Tulsa is actually a beautiful city. If you haven't been, it's
never
shocked that it's as nice as it is. So just a little background, Pittsburgh was in the running to host the bubble for the NHL. And as we were looking at all the different factors, one of the big issues that the NHL brought up was the access to healthcare. How could we provide a safe environment for not only all the players, but everyone else that would be associated? And interviews happened with both Allegheny Health Network and UPMC. I think as we look at what the post-COVID world looks like, there is going to be a need for cities to focus in on availability of healthcare. I think that telemedicine is going to grow exponentially. I believe that every hotel is going to have a telemedicine portal for people who are staying at the hotel, and that there's going to be this whole new economy opening up around telemedicine and everything. Other than that, the idea of where we are geographically located, as people slowly start to take flights again, is an incredible benefit. We have that ability to be drivable within 5 hours, everywhere from Baltimore to Detroit. Geographically, we can have people gather when people gather again, and looking at that. Within the tech world, I still see us growing. And I talk to not only the companies that are located here that are homegrown, but those that moved here in order to have an R&D hub. And I talk to developers who are also talking with the companies on a national, international basis. There is a very strong appetite to grow companies within Pittsburgh. So I see that as being a benefit as well. And then the last part of it is we're under the microscope, just like every other city. And we talk about this as mayors. How are we going to deal with the present COVID crisis and the anticipated crisis in October, November, when the coronavirus season begins and the flu season begins? If we go into it with numbers like we have now, it's going to be very detrimental. If we are able to lower those numbers and then have an adequate response that lessens the amount of people who are affected, we have incredible opportunities for things such as the film industry that is not going back to New York, that is not going back to Los Angeles, to be
Okay.
able to draw them here.
So that's a great example. Yeah. And, you know, it actually is very heartbreaking to me to see the decimation of restaurants and small businesses here, because we've been known as a region around the world for being the best place to grow small companies. We ranked in like number 16 in the last Kaufman report about the best place for people to build small companies. So I'm going to ask Jonathan to start to ask some of the questions that have been asked, and thematically, just, you know, be mindful that they're coming at you with
all over the place.
Yeah,
It's
they're
good.
all over the place.
Great stuff here. One that stood out to me is, what are your thoughts on providing more safety in Market Square during the afternoon hours?
Yeah, what we've seen is from around the city, dealers who have worked mainly neighborhood areas have moved into downtown. So the folks that were pushing heroin along East Ohio Street in the north side have crossed over the bridges, and they've been moving into downtown simply because there's nobody on the street on East Ohio Street, and they can't blend in. And with the access of public transportation to downtown, the number of centers that deal with addiction and homelessness and provide services downtown, we've seen an increase in the number of drug dealers that have moved in downtown as well. The two things that we're doing immediately, number one is we've increased the number of visible uniformed police officers in the downtown area. And the second is we're working with the downtown business district in order to be able to provide more outdoor activities, more foot traffic, more access to tables at restaurants. Recently, another restaurant has closed in Market Square that will be taken over by a bank. Those types of operations take away from that critical vitality of having people on the streets. People on the streets help to lessen crime. Officers help to lessen crime. The other thing we did is we assigned $1.5 million this year in order to create a partnership with Allegheny Health Networks. And we have combinations of social workers working with police officers, so that when we do have people who are struggling with addiction, that are homeless or mental health issues, that we're getting them the help they need and not just putting them in handcuffs.
Okay, Jonathan, keep going.
So we've got two questions here from Ellie Gordon. Wants to know, actually, well, let's just start with just one, because these could take a while. So I think this is pretty interesting here, and definitely is a little different. Your thoughts on expanding renewable energy in Pittsburgh to create tons of great jobs in this time when they're really needed. Can we prioritize this as an effort to help us be successful in the new world that we're in?
Yes. I can't tell you how much of an issue this is for me personally. So I have been in touch with the folks from the Biden campaign that wrote Build Back Better, and have asked for them to work with a group of mayors from Upper Appalachia in the Ohio Valley, areas that have been built upon and dependent upon fossil fuels for our economy. And so the mayors of Huntington, West Virginia, Morgantown, West Virginia, Pittsburgh, Youngstown, Ohio, Dayton, Ohio, Columbus, Ohio, Cincinnati, and Louisville, Kentucky. And what we're looking to do is create an American Marshall Plan that focuses on the geographic area of ours in helping to convert our economy away from fossil fuels and into renewable energy by providing grants for companies to locate here and create manufacturing jobs around them. You want to turn a coal miner into an environmentalist? Put a paycheck in his hands. So instead of the fight between Sierra Club and the United Steelworkers, let's pull them together and create a blue-green alliance. Let's look at it as a transition, because doing it as a light switch will absolutely devastate all the communities around us. But if we look at it on the terms of a 15-year plan, we can not only build out this entire region as the leaders of renewable energy, but provide for generations good paying jobs. So in order to be able to get that process going, we have engaged with Columbia University and the University of Pittsburgh School of Business, the CAT School, to provide a report by the middle of October that engages all of the cities mentioned and their corresponding universities. Marshall in Huntington, West Virginia University, Youngstown State, University of Dayton, Ohio State, University of Cincinnati, University of Louisville.
So the role of I love this thing that cities really and mayors have a huge amount of influence in terms of our future for tomorrow. The federal government does need to step up though, right? There's a HEROES Act. Can you talk about some of those things? I mean,
we're
without them.
We're right now in the 48-hour Hail Mary phase. So again, partnering with, and I just got a call from Harrisburg about this, partnering, and tomorrow I think we'll be doing a press conference with Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, 3 battleground states, but also 3 states that are still reeling from the deindustrialization of the 1980s and from the post-economic Great Recession of 2008. What would be the effect if we don't have a federal program economically in these 3 states? And the mayors from all 3 states are signing a letter to the president and to our senators saying that there will not be an economic recovery in our region without direct federal assistance. And that's a given. I mean, it can be looked at from a number of different ways, but if you allow small and large cities to go bankrupt on a national basis, the economic recovery will take many, many more years than if we have sustaining local government. So much of the COVID response is required by us. So much of the economic burden is being borne by us. And it's national. It's not a city of Pittsburgh issue. And it needs a national response.
Well, you've also started initiatives and teams and hiring around the issues of equity, diversity, inclusion. You've pulled a whole bunch of people in to help you with that. Can you talk a little bit about some of those efforts and how that plays into tomorrow?
Yeah, I mean, this is something that we started years ago. It wasn't a reaction to the present situation. Our Office of Equity is one of only 5 in the nation, and it is run out of my office and the mayor's office. The Office of Equity has a team around it that deals, number one, with critical communities, veterans, those transitioning out of prison, homeless, those suffering addiction, mental health, areas where the city hasn't had any active involvement since 1920s. And these areas then expand, and we look at it systematically across the city. So when we talk about equity, we talk about it as a nation around racial disparity or gender inequality and issues like that. But when we look at it as a city, we look at it streetlights. Why do some neighborhoods only have a street light at the intersection, and other neighborhoods have streetlights on every telephone pole? That is an issue of light equity. And if you start to look at that and then start tracking back which streets are being paved and which are just being, potholes are being filled, you start to see that in the areas of lower income, both black and white, the amount of resources being used by the city has been very inequitable. So we start to look at it by each department, and each department on an annual basis has to provide an equity report to our budget office. in order to be able to account for their requests for the upcoming year. And we've been doing this now for a couple of years. It's improved not only the accountability within our departments, but we've also seen an increase in minority and women business participation within city government.
So what could you say to the tech community in terms of all of us being helpful? Like,
Yeah.
ask us.
Yeah.
Ask
I
us.
mean,
What can we do?
we talked about this the last time as well. And really now is the time for tech to step up. And I'm not saying that or putting it strictly on the tech industry. It's all across the board. All of us need to do more in order to be able to create a better community. And we have to look at the indicators and the data as the baseline of saying that this is real, and it's not something we can debate that exists or doesn't exist. When childbirth rates within our Black community rival third world nations, then we have a real serious problem within the city, and we have to be able to address it. Internally, I think tech companies have the opportunity and the responsibility to be able to look at younger people. And this is why I talk about the summer of Earn and Learn, but you can do it on your own. You don't have to join the program, of being able to mentor them and to being able to realize that they too can be a part of the new economy. For so many of young Pittsburghers, they don't see that. They see a community where a new restaurant's going in that they're never going to be able to afford. They see new apartments being built in their neighborhood that they'll never be able to live in. And they see this divisiveness between what's happening and where their place will be. And you go 30, 40 miles out into Fayette County and you see the same thing. And there's this disconnect between those that are a part of the new economy and those that are being left behind. So that connection needs to happen with the tech community at an earlier age than looking at that CMU graduate. You need to be looking at that high school student at Westinghouse and letting her know that there is a place for her in a Bakery Square office. The second part is being able to contribute directly, and let me just be blunt about that. That means money. Into different types of programs that are empowered and created at the neighborhood level. And I talked to you last time about how I would love to build the combination between tech and youth sports, in particular football. Our youth sport programs should be doing more than trying to find the next quarterback at Brashear High School. We should be finding the next CFO at Mellon Bank. And we should be doing it in a way that encompasses the tech community into adopting a team and then adopting those players and being able to provide them with after-school learning opportunities and other things to be able to find those kids and give them the opportunity to see what the future could be for them. So many of these young kids just never walked into an office.
Right. And you
can't visualize it. It's hard to dream it.
And Charlie Batch has a program, Best of the Batch. That's not in the city, it's in Homestead, but it's built around basketball. And one of his summer programs built about basketball and reading and having access. So that model does work by giving exposure and leveraging sports.
Yep, we started a program in Leamington at Paulson Rec Center called RectiTech. And what it does is we have after-school programs that are based upon tech learning. So we're teaching coding. We're teaching kids how to take apart a computer and rebuild it. We're with electrical engineers. We're working in order to be able to have more than just after-school basketball programs.
Right.
But I got an email from one of the moms in which she said to me is her son is as excited to go to that program as he is to go to football practice. And we're just not giving the kids the opportunity. That's all.
Well, we've taken a lot of your time, and I got to tell you, your Majestic Lane, who works,
Yeah.
had him on the show, and I've had conversations with him on the side. And you know what he said? He said, Audrey, you got to make tech cool. Cool. You got to make it cool. And he looked at me and he said, Audrey, you're not cool. You got to make it where it is the hip thing to do.
Do you know who is a big proponent of tech and tech programs for kids? Wiz Khalifa.
Make it cool, right? So we need to get Wiz back and help us embed
Wiz
it.
was an honor student at Alderdice.
Right.
I don't realize that he was a nerd. He was into technology and still is.
Right. So we need to leverage that. So we have had a chance to talk longer than we typically do. And even though the mayor was only about 8 minutes late, we still had more time with him than we do with most guests. So we're going to work on, getting Wiz. Maybe Wiz can help us with this program of whether it's RectiTech or other things. I know you have a lot that you have to attend to. I know you represent us globally. You've been on the news. You have been representing our city. You work with other mayors, and we appreciate that. I know that you get, a lot of whips each and every day, all day, but we care about the issues that you care about.
Well, here's what I would ask then too with, we talked about the idea of putting together a group and looking at Wi-Fi and creating a model for the city that falls within the state laws. A lot of people think that we can do what Chattanooga did. We can't.
Right.
We're not legally allowed, but we can do better in putting together expertise from this organization to say, how is it we can do it? I still want to follow up with you on that.
We're there.
Then I'm also going to ask to follow up with you with RectiTech. It would be great if Pittsburgh Tech Council took on that initiative. We can provide the kids, we can provide the locations, we can provide the tools, but if there were people who were willing to mentor and being able to volunteer some time to be able to help to get that kid into the path of what they should be learning, courses they should be taking in order to be able to get into the career of working at our local companies. It would be unprecedented in this country.
Let's get Wiz and we can start.
We have one of my board members is on this call and he's writing me and saying, let's do it. So I get it. I want to thank you so much. Take a break, take that tie off, go sit outside, do something for yourself. Are you wearing shorts? Are you wearing shorts?
I'm not going to tell. No, unfortunately.
Okay. Well, I want to thank everyone. Tomorrow we're actually having the chief operating officer of Sheets. And the mayor, you know that they've opened up a little operations in Pittsburgh over near Bakery Square and Innovation. So they are taking advantage of penetrating their presence in Pittsburgh for the talent that's here as well. So we're excited to have him, and that's how we're going to wrap the week up. So stay safe, take a break. All these people care about you that were on the call and beyond. And we are going to be a great small city. I believe that.
Okay, and any of the other questions that we didn't get to, just forward them over to James and we'll respond individually to them. That's
great. Thank you. Thank you for that. Awesome.
Talk to you soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Go Pens.
Okay.